I've brought up a story about reincarnation. Some of you might believe in it, and some might not. But let me briefly explain my family background. We are a Buddhist household, so my parents often talked about these things. That if you commit sins in this life, you might be reborn as a snake or another animal, and if you accumulate merit, you can be reincarnated as a human. They would talk about these things often, but I have a moment that actually made me believe in reincarnation. It's a strange story that made me think, reincarnation might really be possible. To briefly explain, I'm in my mid-30s. I was born and raised in my hometown, and my parents still live there. This is a story from when I was young, back in my hometown. It must have been the mid-90s. As you all know, back then, people lived like one big family, regardless of whether they were next door or across the street. Everyone knew each other, and the parents were all close. But thinking back, there's that structure of a two-story detached house where the owner lives on the second floor and rents out the first floor. So, we had our house, and there were two houses on the first floor. There was our house, and there was the house next door where two brothers lived. One was 2 or 3 years older than me, and the other was 1 year older. Since they were next door, we were really close. Let's call the older one Young Soo and the younger one Young Sik. Even though they were brothers, it's still strange to think about today, but they looked nothing alike. Simply put, Young Soo was tall and slender even back in elementary school, with a long face, while Young Sik was short and round. Since we lived in the countryside, it was our daily life to play together, going up the mountain behind the house to catch salamanders, catching fish in the creek, or catching frogs in the paddies. You see, when you go up that mountain, it's hard for adults to carry sickles, saws, or hoes back and forth, so they built these wooden sheds to store their tools and just went up and down empty-handed. There was one abandoned shed on our side of the mountain. We found it while playing, and we brought our toys and shovels there, calling it our secret base and playing there. I remember that vividly. So, while we were running around playing like that, I think it was around 96. Since I hadn't even started school yet, Young Soo and Young Sik's family said they were going on summer vacation. I said, "Wow, that sounds great. I want to go too. Have a safe trip." And the family left. Usually they should have been back in 3 or 4 days, but even after 5 or 6 days, they didn't return. I was wondering, they should be back by now. Why aren't they? Then, I overheard my parents talking in the living room that Young Soo had an accident and passed away. Because I was so young, they didn't tell me exactly what happened, they just told me he passed away. Since he was a really close older brother I spent time with, I felt so sorry and wondered how it could have happened. Since the whole neighborhood was like a family, everyone was sad, and the parents were grieving and comforting each other. But after Young Soo passed away, Young Sik became very depressed. After a while, he started going to school, and I did too. When I was starting school, I moved to the lower neighborhood about a 10-minute walk away, so naturally, we grew apart. Even when we met, it wasn't like when we were young and went up the mountain to play. We'd go to the arcade or meet at the supermarket to buy something, so that incident was gradually forgotten, and I started growing apart from him. It must have been around the time I was starting middle school. About 7 or 8 years later, news suddenly came that Young Sik's parents had a late-born child. Since the parents had grown a bit distant, everyone was surprised to hear the news, and the neighborhood elders were joking, saying, "That's great. They're so late, but look how good their marriage is," creating a celebratory atmosphere. About a year later, the late-born brother was born. Let's call this brother Young Hoon. After Young Hoon was born, I went to high school, so I had even less of a chance to see them. But my mother went to the upper neighborhood and saw the baby, who was about 2 or 3 years old by then. When she came home, she said to me, "It's so creepy. He looks exactly like Young Soo." She said he was so identical to the brother who passed away. I asked, "Mom, what are you talking about?" She said, "You know Young Sik and Young Soo didn't look alike, right?" Oh yeah, it was hard to believe they were even biological brothers. But this new brother, Young Hoon, looks just like Young Soo? Not only his appearance but his physique was also identical, slender and tall, even as a child. She even said there was a mole under his eye, and the location was exactly the same. Besides that, there was another physical trait. I'll keep the details vague because it could identify them, but it's not common. She said even that trait was the same. What? Really? But honestly, I didn't really believe in reincarnation. So I just thought, well, they are parents, so maybe that's possible. And let it pass. I asked, "Mom, what are you talking about?" She said, "You know Young Sik and Young Soo didn't look alike, right?" Oh yeah, it was hard to believe they were even biological brothers. But this new brother, Young Hoon, looks just like Young Soo. Not only his appearance but his physique was also identical, slender and tall, even as a child. She even said there was a mole under his eye, and the location was exactly the same. Besides that, there was another physical trait. I'll keep the details vague because it could identify them, but it's not common. She said even that trait was the same. What? Really? But honestly, I didn't really believe in reincarnation. So I just thought, Well, they are parents, so maybe that's possible. And let it pass. Another year must have passed. I had an errand to run in the upper neighborhood where I used to live, so I was walking up. There are still no supermarkets or convenience stores in that upper neighborhood. You have to come down to the street where my house is to buy anything. I was walking up, and I saw two people coming down from the upper side. It was evening, so it was hard to see, but as we got closer, we bumped into each other. It was Young Sik and his late-born brother, Young Hoon. They said they were going to the convenience store, so they were coming down. It was dark, so I didn't really notice at first. But as we got close, I said, "Oh, hi," and greeted them. When I looked at his face, I was genuinely shocked. He looked exactly like the brother I remembered from my childhood. It was as if the face of that young brother I saw when I was 3 or 4 years old was right there. I thought I saw a ghost. I was genuinely shocked because he was identical. But in front of them, even if I was shocked, I couldn't be rude, as it would be hurtful to Young Sik. So I acted like nothing was wrong and greeted him. "Hey, how have you been? It's been a while." "Oh, so you're Young Hoon? Do you know who I am?" As I was greeting him, suddenly the young brother, Young Hoon, looked up at me. It was the first time I had ever seen him, but he said, "It's been a while." He was about 3 years old, just starting to talk. Until then, I thought, well, he's young, so he might be copying what his brother says. But then he said, "When are we going to our secret base?" I had forgotten about that secret base for 7 or 8 years, so how could he know that? I was so creeped out. I asked Young Sik, "Hey, have you been there with him?" Young Sik was also so surprised and said, "No, I had forgotten about that too. What is this?" I asked Young Hoon, "Do you know where the secret base is? Do you know what it is?" He said, "That warehouse made of wooden planks up there, right?" I was so shocked, and Young Sik was so shocked. Even back then, and even now, we wouldn't be able to find it if we tried because we had forgotten it to that extent. But this little brother knew it. We were both so shocked that we just hurriedly said, "Oh, okay, see you later, we'll go later," and parted ways. A year or two later, I remembered how creeped out I was, so I asked Young Sik, "Do you remember Young Hoon talking about that?" People say that when you ask very young children what happened in their mother's womb, they might tell you this or that, but then they forget about it later. Like that, he didn't even remember that he had said such a thing, and he didn't even remember meeting me. So I thought, maybe he brought Young Soo's memories with him and remembered them until that age. A few years later, I passed him on the bus, and I was shocked as if I saw a ghost again. He had reached the age Young Soo was before he passed away. He looked exactly the same. Even his hairstyle was identical. I was so shocked on the bus that I felt like I saw a ghost. When I went home and told my parents, my mother said she had passed by and seen him too, and she was always shocked, feeling as if he had come back. Through this, I heard that the elderly people in the neighborhood also thought the same. This became the moment that made my family and me believe that reincarnation might actually be real. This happened a while after that previous incident, when I was in my second year of high school. I remember it being an incredibly hot summer. I was always the type to suffer from the heat, constantly complaining about how hot it was back then. School had ended, and I was with 2 friends. There were 3 of us total, and I don't remember exactly why, but we were going to this large commercial building near our school. You know the type. There are regular retail shops on the first floor, a cinema near the top, and a hospital floor somewhere in the middle. We were on our way up, probably to the cinema or the arcade above it. It must have been around 8 or 9 p.m. By that time, the hospital floor was supposed to be closed, and I knew for a fact that the elevator wasn't supposed to stop on that floor at night. But while we were heading to the 7th or 8th floor, suddenly the elevator went ding and stopped at the hospital level. The doors opened, and of course the lights were all off so you couldn't see a thing. Only the light from the elevator spilled into the darkness. I was like, "Hey, why is it opening? Why is it stopping?" The atmosphere felt so weird that my friend quickly closed the doors and we went up to our floor. But as I mentioned, it was the middle of summer. I was a person who was always dying of heat, but suddenly a chill swept over me as if I were having a feverish shiver. I was shaking so hard my teeth were chattering and I kept saying, "Why is it so cold? Why is it so cold?" The AC in the building wasn't even set that low, but I was freezing. I thought, I can't take this. Let's just finish what we're here for and get out. One of the 2 friends I was with had a bit of a sixth sense. This friend kept looking at me with a worried expression. We finished our business and went down to the first floor about 30 minutes later, but I was still shaking the whole time. The friend with the sixth sense kept frowning, then pointed to a bench and said, "Hey, just sit down there for a second." I just wanted to leave. It was cold inside the building due to the AC, and I knew it would be hot outside, so I really wanted to head out. But he insisted, "No, seriously, just sit down for a minute." He sat me down and said, "Close your eyes and give me your hands." He held my hands and closed his own eyes, telling me, "Don't open your eyes for 5 minutes, no matter what." I didn't know what was going on, but I just said okay. I sat there with my eyes closed, holding his hands, and about 5 minutes later, the shivering and the chattering teeth suddenly vanished. All of a sudden it became extremely hot, like walking into a steam room. My usual heat-intolerant self was back. I was so hot that I asked, "Whoa, why is it suddenly so hot? What just happened?" My friend opened his eyes, wiping sweat from his face, and said, "Phew, that's done." I asked, "What do you mean? What was with the cold and then the heat?" He told me that when the elevator doors opened at the hospital floor, 4 child spirits had gotten in. They each grabbed one of my arms and legs, shaking me because they wanted to play. That's why I was shaking so violently. Having 4 spirits attached to me was making my body icy cold. He said they weren't evil, but out of the 3 of us, I looked like the one who would actually play with them, so they had grabbed onto me. He said he had managed to calm them down and send them away, which is why the shivering stopped and the heat returned, and that they wouldn't come back. That's how that story ended.